The Gorath Collective was a proud empire. For centuries, they had ruled the trade lanes of 3 spiral arms. Their ships were sleek, silver vessels shaped like blades of light moving through space with perfect discipline. Their fleets were designed with precision and elegance, and their crews were trained to think in terms of numbers, logic, and calculation. So when a human ship entered their territory, the Gorath officers gathered on the observation deck of the war station Nakarash to see it for themselves. Commander Veyron of the Gorath Collective looked at the screen in disbelief. He had seen thousands of ships in his career. Most alien designs had some beauty, some cleverness, or at least a sense of order in them. But the thing floating in the star system before him looked like nothing he had ever seen. The human vessel was huge, but it looked unfinished, as if someone had taken an old mining rig, bolted spare parts onto it, and then wrapped it in sheets of random metal. The hull was jagged, covered in mismatched colors: gray, rust brown, and even some painted blue that was already peeling in space. Its engines were uneven, one sputtering more than the others, sending waves of exhaust across the void. "Is this a warship?" one Gorath officer asked, his voice shaking between amusement and shock. Veyron let out a long hiss, a Gorath sound of disbelief. "The humans dare to enter our borders with that?" The crew burst into laughter. The Gorath were not an emotional species, but even they could not stop themselves. The human ship looked more like a moving scrapyard than a war machine. "It is a disgrace," one officer chuckled. "A flying junk pile." Another added, "Perhaps it is a cargo hauler they painted to look like a warship." The laughter continued, echoing across the command deck. Gorath ships were works of art, smooth as water, strong as iron. This thing from Earth was the complete opposite. It was ugly, chaotic, and ridiculous. But as the laughter died down, Veyron's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The humans were not retreating. They were not hiding. Their strange ship moved boldly into the star system, its nose aimed straight at Gorath patrol lines. "Fools," Veyron muttered. "They think bravery will save them." Meanwhile, inside the human vessel Dauntless, Captain Mira Havel sat calmly in her chair. The bridge was cramped and noisy, with wires hanging from the ceiling and screens patched together from different generations of technology. The hum of the engines could be heard everywhere, and sometimes sparks leapt from the panels when the ship turned too sharply. Her crew did not look like the officers of a polished fleet. Some wore old uniforms, others simple work clothes with patches on the sleeves. A few were still covered in grease from repairing the engines. But their eyes were bright, their voices steady. "Enemy ships detected, Captain," said Lieutenant Ramos, checking his screen. "Looks like 3 patrol cruisers on the far side of the belt." "Let them look," Mira said with a small smile. "That's what this ship was built for." "Built?" one engineer muttered, shaking his head. "More like glued together," the bridge chuckled. They all knew the truth. The Dauntless was humanity's first attempt at a real interstellar warship. Earth was not rich, not powerful, and certainly not experienced in galactic war. They had taken what they could, old orbital stations, broken freighters, spare parts from mining rigs, and turned them into a single giant ship. To outsiders, it looked stupid. To the crew, it was home. Back on the Gorath station, Veyron watched the humans continue forward. "Prepare weapons," he ordered. "Let us end this comedy." The patrol cruisers moved into formation, their silver hulls shining like blades under the light of the nearby star. They charged their energy cannons, elegant beams of pure plasma humming with power. Veyron leaned forward. He wanted to see the look of despair on human faces as their ridiculous ship was torn apart. But then something strange happened. The human ship did not slow. It did not change course. Instead, it increased speed, its mismatched engines roaring like thunder. The Dauntless flew straight at the Gorath patrol line as if it had no fear. "What are they doing?" one Gorath officer gasped. "They are not even moving to defend themselves." Another shouted. Veyron narrowed his eyes. This was not bravery. "This was madness! Fire!" he commanded. Blue beams of energy lanced across the void, striking the human vessel. Explosions rippled across its hull, sending chunks of scrap metal flying. Sparks filled the void, and the ship's strange armor glowed from the heat. But when the smoke cleared, the Dauntless was still there, still moving forward. Veyron blinked. That was impossible. No ship could take a direct hit from Gorath plasma weapons and survive, and yet the human ship did. The reason became clear when the sensors zoomed in. The human hull was layered in strange, uneven plates of different metals, Some were melted, some bent, but together they had absorbed the blast in unexpected ways. The plasma energy had spread across the irregular surfaces, bleeding off instead of piercing through. "It's patchwork," one officer muttered in disbelief. "Their ship is absorbing energy through chaos." Varen felt his scales prickle. This was not the way of war. This was not design, this was something else. Inside the Dauntless, the crew cheered. "Direct hit," Ramos reported, his grin wide. "Hull damage minimal. The plates held." Captain Mira nodded. "Good, keep moving. They won't understand how to fight us." She knew what the Gorath were thinking. They saw a stupid ship, a foolish design. But that was the point. Humanity had built the Dauntless not to look strong, but to confuse and frustrate. Every mistake in design was part of the plan. Every scrap of metal bolted onto the hull was another trick, another way to survive. "Captain," said the engineer, wiping sweat from his forehead, "engines are running hot. We can push harder, but something might break." "Something always breaks," Mira said calmly. "That's why we brought spares." The crew laughed again. They were used to this. On Earth, nothing ever worked perfectly, so they had learned to make do. And now, that spirit of improvisation was their greatest weapon. Varen clenched his claws as the humans drew closer. "They cannot win," he told himself. "They cannot." But doubt crept into his mind. He had seen something today he could not explain. A ship that should not exist. A ship that was ugly, foolish, and weak, yet somehow still alive. The Gorath crew began to whisper. Some still laughed, but it was nervous laughter now. The humans were not afraid. They were not retreating. And that made them dangerous. Varen stood tall. "Send more ships," he ordered. "We will crush them with numbers if nothing else." But deep down he could not shake the thought. What if the humans had built this ship on purpose? What if the stupidest warship he had ever seen was not stupid at all? The Gorath war station Nakarash was silent. Every officer on the command deck stared at the screen, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. The human warship, ugly and broken-looking, had survived a direct volley from Gorath plasma cannons. Commander Varen's jaw was tight. His scales shifted color slightly, a sign of discomfort among his species. He was a veteran of many battles. He had destroyed cruisers, battled pirates, and fought rival empires. He had never seen a ship like this. "This is impossible," muttered Officer Kelth. "Our weapons should have split it apart. That thing is patched together like a broken toy." "And yet it lives," Varen growled. "Do not underestimate them. Prepare the second volley. This time, aim for the engines." Inside the Dauntless, the human crew celebrated. The bridge smelled faintly of burnt wires and ozone, but nobody cared. Sparks still flickered in one corner, and one of the screens was cracked, but the crew laughed and clapped each other on the shoulders. "They thought that would finish us," shouted Lieutenant Ramos. "Did you see their faces?" "They don't understand junk armor," said Engineer Patel with a grin. "We built this ship from 20 different hulls, and every piece reacts differently. Plasma spreads out, it doesn't cut through." Captain Mira Havel allowed herself a small smile. She knew her crew had done well. But she also knew the Gorath would not stop after one volley. "They'll aim smarter next time," Mira said. "They'll try to cripple us. Keep the shields on standby. Patel, how's the plating?"
"Hot," Patel replied.
"But still holding. The more they shoot, the more the outer layers melt into each other. Makes it even harder to predict," Mira nodded. That was exactly why humanity had built the ship this way. It looked stupid, but it worked because no alien computer could predict what would happen when weapons hit it. "Then let's show them we're not just a target," Mira said. "Helm, bring us closer." The Dauntless charged again, its mismatched engines leaving uneven trails of fire in the void. The Gorath officers leaned forward in shock. "They're moving toward us?" After that, "Commander, humans must be insane." Varen did not laugh. His eyes narrowed. "No, not insane, bold. They are trying to frighten us." "Then what do we do?" "We remind them who rules these stars." "Fire again!" The Gorath cruisers unleashed another wave of plasma. Blue beams struck the Dauntless, shaking it violently. Chunks of metal broke off, spinning into space. The human ship looked as if it would fall apart at any second, but again, it kept moving. The armor bent and melted, but the inner hull stayed intact. And then the Dauntless answered. "Fire main guns," Captain Mira ordered. The ship's forward cannons roared to life. They were not elegant energy beams like the Gorath used. They were giant railguns, primitive by galactic standards but brutally effective. Slugs of solid tungsten shot across space at near relativistic speeds. The Gorath shields flared, trying to absorb the impacts. But Gorath shields were designed for plasma and lasers, not for solid projectiles. The railgun rounds punched through, slamming into one cruiser's hull. Explosions tore across its side, venting atmosphere and fire into the void. On the Gorath station, silence filled the command deck. Shields are failing against their metal rods, one officer whispered. Not rods, Veyron growled. Kinetic weapons, primitive, crude, and very effective. He finally understood. The humans had not made mistakes in their design. They had chosen weapons and armor that ignored the entire foundation of Gorath technology. They fight outside the rules, Veyron muttered. On the Dauntless, the crew cheered again. One cruiser crippled, Ramos reported. The others are backing off. Good, Mira said. But don't celebrate too soon. They'll be angry now, and angry they were. The remaining 2 Gorath cruisers swung around, unleashing a storm of missiles. These were advanced, self-guided weapons with intelligent cores, designed to weave past defenses. The crew tensed, but Mira raised her hand calmly. Deploy the containers. At once, huge cargo containers launched from the Dauntless. They were not weapons, just empty crates filled with scrap metal. But in the chaos of battle, the Gorath missile guidance systems detected dozens of new moving targets. Some missiles slammed into the crates. Others were confused by the shards of metal that scattered when the containers exploded. Only a few made it through, striking the human hull with heavy blasts. The Dauntless shook violently. Alarms rang. Panels sparked. But still, the ship endured. Veyron was furious. They tricked our missiles with garbage, he roared. His claws dug into the arm of his chair. They fight with scrap and tricks, not with honor. But one officer, younger and more cautious, spoke quietly. Commander, maybe that is their strength. They turn weakness into weapons. Veyron ignored him. We will not be humiliated by primitives. Send the 3rd cruiser wing. Overwhelm them with fire. For the humans, the situation was becoming harder. The ship was damaged. Whole sections of plating were gone, leaving twisted metal exposed. 2 engines were running hot, one barely alive. The crew was exhausted, sweat dripping down their faces as they worked at consoles that kept sparking. But their spirit was strong. Captain, if we stay here, we'll be surrounded, Ramos warned. Mira nodded. Then we don't stay. We go through. Through their fleet? Patel asked in shock. Yes, Mira said simply. It's the last thing they expect. The Dauntless turned sharply, heading straight toward the Gorath reinforcements. The Gorath officers gasped. They're charging us again. This is madness. Veyron leaned forward. His heart pounded. No, this is strategy. They are trying to break our formation. Do not let them pass. The cruisers opened fire, filling the void with plasma and missiles. The Dauntless roared forward, its strange armor glowing with heat, its engines screaming. Inside, Mira shouted, All power to the railguns. Fire everything we have. The cannons thundered, unleashing round after round. Projectiles ripped into the Gorath formation, tearing shields apart, smashing hulls. One cruiser exploded in a flash of light. Another spun out of control, venting fire. The Dauntless punched through the line, battered but alive, on the Gorath station. The crew sat in stunned silence. One human ship, just one, had forced 3 cruisers to retreat and destroyed 2 more. This is impossible, whispered Officer Kelth again. No, Veyron said slowly, his voice heavy with realization. It is worse than impossible. It is real. He finally saw the truth. The humans had built a warship that looked like a joke, but every piece of it had a purpose. Their scrap armor confused weapons. Their primitive guns bypassed shields. Their tricks made advanced systems useless. It was not stupidity. It was genius. Veyron's claws tightened on the rail. This is a species that fights with unpredictability. They do not play by rules, and that makes them dangerous. On the Dauntless, the crew patched holes, welded plates, and restarted damaged systems. The ship limped but did not stop. Captain Mira stood at the center of the bridge, calm but proud. They laughed at us, she said quietly, but now they know. Humanity may not build pretty ships, but we build ships that win. The crew cheered once more, and across the galaxy word began to spread. The stupidest warship ever seen had just defeated one of the most advanced fleets in space. The Gorath fleet limped back into safer orbit, carrying the shame of defeat. Never before had the proud collective lost to a single enemy ship, especially one that looked like a broken freighter. The surviving cruisers hid their damage behind silence, and their crews avoided speaking to each other. Inside the command station Nakarash, Commander Veyron stood in the war chamber with his officers. The room's walls glowed with faint light from the star outside, and the air carried the sharp smell of heated metal. No one dared speak loudly. At last, Veyron broke the silence. "Explain," he said. His voice was cold. "How did one primitive ship outwit us?" The officers shifted nervously. "They fight without logic," one muttered. "Their ship is chaos. Their weapons are crude. But somehow the results are effective," Veyron finished. He stared at the star map. "They fight like no species we have ever faced. We prepared for science and order. They answered with tricks and madness." On the other side of the system, aboard the battered Dauntless, the crew celebrated in their own way. The mess hall smelled of reheated rations and engine oil, but spirits were high. The humans clapped, laughed, and told stories about how the Gorath ships had panicked when the railgun slugs tore through their shields. Lieutenant Ramos raised a dented metal cup. "To the ugliest ship in the galaxy!" He cheered. The crew roared back, "To the Dauntless!" Even Captain Mira allowed herself a smile as she stood at the edge of the hall. She listened to her crew, proud of how they turned exhaustion into laughter. Many of them were bruised from being thrown during combat. Others had burns on their hands from patching live wires. Yet here they were, full of energy, because they had faced an empire and survived. Engineer Patel sat down across from Mira with his plate of food. "You know, Captain," he said, "I think they hate us not because we beat them, but because we embarrassed them." Mira nodded slowly. "Yes, the Gorath value order. We showed them chaos can win," Patel grinned. "Then maybe chaos is our weapon." The next day, Mira called her senior officers to the bridge. The ship was still damaged, hull-blackened engines running unevenly, but the Dauntless kept moving. "We have two choices," Mira began. "We can retreat to Earth and tell our people we survived our first battle. Or," she paused, letting the silence hang, "we can keep pushing into Gorath space and prove that humanity is not to be underestimated." The officers exchanged looks. Retreat meant safety, but it also meant weakness. Humanity's first impression on the galaxy would be as cowards who ran after one victory. Ramos spoke first. "If we run, the Gorath will laugh at us. If we fight, they'll fear us." "I vote we fight," Patel nodded. "We didn't build this ship just to go home. We built it to be seen." Mira smiled faintly. "Then it's decided. We push forward." Meanwhile, back on the Gorath homeworld, the High Council gathered. These were the most powerful minds of the collective, wrapped in robes of deep blue and silver. They sat in a circle, their eyes glowing faintly under the lights. Commander Veyron stood before them, shame burning in his chest. "You lost ships to scrap," one counselor hissed. "Yes," Veyron admitted, "but it is worse than that. The humans built their ship to appear weak. It is a weapon of deception. Their tactics are unpredictable. They are not fools. They are tricksters," the counselors murmured. Trickery was dishonorable to the Gorath. They valued direct strength, clear victories, clean designs. To hear that humans use deception as a weapon was disturbing. "Are they dangerous?" another counselor asked. Veyron hesitated. Then he spoke the truth. "Yes, more dangerous than their technology should allow. They make our order useless. Against them we must think differently, or we will lose." Back on the Dauntless, Mira tested her theory of unpredictability. The ship drifted into a Gorath-controlled mining belt. Asteroids floated around them, glowing faintly with ore veins. A small Gorath patrol frigate spotted the Dauntless and immediately opened fire, expecting another easy kill. "Time to test something new," Mira said. Instead of returning fire, she ordered Patel to power down the ship's core. The Dauntless went dark, lights flickering out. From the outside, it looked dead, just another wreck in the asteroid field. The Gorath frigate scanned, confused. Its sensors could not find life signs through the heavy ore, and the human ship blended with the broken rocks. When the frigate moved closer to investigate, Mira gave the command. "Engines on." "Fire railguns," the Dauntless roared back to life. Projectiles slammed into the frigate at point-blank range. The Gorath ship shattered in seconds, torn apart before it had time to raise its shields. The human crew cheered again, but this time with awe. They never expected it. Ramos whispered. "We looked dead, but we were waiting." Mira nodded. "That's what they don't understand. We don't just fight, we play. News of the battle spread quickly. Other alien species began whispering. Some laughed at the idea of humans building junk ships. Others warned that those same junk ships had destroyed elite Gorath vessels. Among the smaller races, whispers turned to excitement. For centuries, the Gorath had bullied weaker civilizations with their sleek fleets and harsh rules. Now a new species had humiliated them with a single warship. Maybe the humans are the galaxy's tricksters, one merchant said in a distant port. Maybe they are the ones who can outwit the tyrants. Commander Veyron studied every report carefully. He replayed the battles again and again, watching the Dauntless trick his ships. Every mistake humans made was deliberate. Every weakness was a hidden strength. They use chaos as a weapon, Veyron admitted to himself. And chaos is the one thing we never trained for. He began to fear that this stupid warship was not the end, but the beginning. On the Dauntless, Mira gathered her crew once more. The ship was scarred, dented, and ugly, but it was alive. And so were they. Listen carefully, Mira said. Her voice was firm, her eyes sharp. The Gorath now know we are not fools, but they still think we are weak. They think this ship is our only weapon. That is their mistake. She leaned forward, lowering her voice so every crew member leaned closer. We will not fight like them. We will never match their numbers or their elegance. But we will always be what they cannot predict. We will be the wild card in their ordered universe. The crew shouted in agreement. For the first time, humanity had found its identity among the stars. They were not builders of beautiful ships. They were not followers of clean strategy. They were tricksters. And in a galaxy ruled by order, that made them unstoppable. Far away on the Gorath Council world, whispers began spreading in the halls of power. The humans fight like no one else. They make fools of us. They must be stopped. But stopping them would not be so easy. For every plan the Gorath made, the humans already had a trick waiting. The legend of the stupidest warship ever seen was growing. And with it the fear of what humanity might do next. The Gorath Collective was furious. Reports of their defeats at the hands of the strange human warship spread like fire across the stars. Their cruisers had been humiliated, their patrols destroyed, their order shaken. On Gorath world, citizens whispered about the humans. At first they had laughed. A flying junk pile cannot win battles, they said. But now, after the loss of entire wings of ships, their laughter turned into uneasy silence. Inside the High Council chamber, the elders of the Gorath sat in a circle of dark stone. Their glowing eyes watched Commander Veyron, who stood before them with his head bowed. You allowed a single human vessel to defeat our fleet, one counselor hissed. Veyron's jaw tightened. I underestimated them. They are not fools. They are not weak. They are dangerous, another elder leaned forward. Dangerous? Their ship is scrap. Their weapons are primitive. How can primitives be dangerous? Veyron lifted his eyes, his voice sharp. Because they do not fight by rules. They trick us. They confuse us. They make our order into chaos. That is their strength, the counselors murmured angrily. Some dismissed his words. Others listened with growing unease. Finally, the oldest counselor spoke. Then we will crush them with overwhelming force. Prepare the fleets. This trickster species must be erased before it spreads. Aboard the Dauntless, Captain Mira Havel received reports of massive Gorath movements. The enemy was not sending patrols anymore. They were gathering entire fleets to hunt down one human warship. In the command room, Mira stood over a flickering star map. Her senior officers watched anxiously. They're pulling ships from 3 sectors, Ramos said. They want us destroyed so badly they're leaving other borders unguarded. Patel frowned. That means thousands of ships. We can't fight that many. No, Mira agreed. We can't fight them head on. But we don't need to. We just need to show them that even their fleets cannot trap us. Her eyes narrowed. We attack first. The officers stared at her. You want us to attack their fleet? Patel asked, half in shock, half in admiration. Yes, Mira said, because that is the last thing they expect. They think we'll run. We won't. We'll go right through their heart. The Dauntless limped through space, its patched hull glowing faintly from repairs. In its belly, the crew prepared every trick they had. Cargo containers were filled with scrap metal for decoys. Old drones were wired with explosives. Even food crates were turned into makeshift bombs. On the bridge, Mira briefed her crew. We are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. But we are the most unpredictable. They will come at us with numbers. We will answer with tricks. If we succeed, the Gorath will never see us the same way again. The crew cheered. Fear lingered in their eyes, but courage was stronger. Far away in the dark reaches of the system, the Gorath fleet assembled. Hundreds of ships formed a wall of silver blades. They glowed with energy, ready to crush the lone human vessel. Varen stood on the bridge of the flagship watching the formation. They cannot escape this time, he said firmly, but deep inside he felt uneasy. The humans had fooled him before, and something told him they would try again. The Dauntless arrived. The Gorath officers laughed when they saw it. The junk ship, blackened and dented, floated toward their shining fleet. It looked more broken than ever, held together by scraps and prayers. Fire immediately, Varen commanded. The first wave of plasma lanced out, striking the Dauntless. The ship shook, but instead of firing back, it released dozens of containers. The Gorath thought they were more decoys. They ignored them, but when the containers opened, swarms of small drones flew out. They were crude, just old repair bots fitted with explosives, but they moved unpredictably, weaving through the fleet. Several slammed into Gorath hulls, detonating in blinding flashes. Shields held against some, but others tore open weak spots. The fleet's perfect formation broke as ships swerved to avoid the strange swarm. Destroy them, Varen roared, but the chaos had already begun. Inside the Dauntless, the bridge shook from impacts. Warnings screamed across the consoles, but Mira's eyes burned with focus. Now, "Full speed ahead!" she shouted. The mismatched engines of the Dauntless screamed to life. The ship charged directly into the heart of the Gorath fleet. Plasma beams streaked around it, missiles exploded, and energy lit the void. Yet somehow the junk ship slipped through, zigzagging in ways no computer could predict. "Fire railguns," Mira ordered. The cannons thundered, tearing into the nearest Gorath cruiser. Shields flared and died, hull plates ripped apart. The cruiser spun out of control, crashing into another vessel. The crew cheered. The trick worked again. Varen slammed his fist against his console. "They are tearing us apart with tricks." "Commander, what do we do?" his officers cried. Varen's jaw tightened. "We adapt. Break formation. Hunt them ship by ship. No order, just attack." It was a desperate order. For the first time in centuries, the disciplined Gorath abandoned formation. Their ships scattered, chasing the Dauntless, and that was exactly what Mira wanted. The human ship darted between Gorath vessels, dropping more decoys and scrap clouds. Enemy sensors filled with false signals. Missiles chased empty crates while the Dauntless slipped away unseen. At one point, the ship even ejected a burning engine part, making it look like the vessel was destroyed. A Gorath wing cheered, only to be blasted apart when the Dauntless emerged from the smoke behind them. "Captain, this is madness," Patel shouted, laughing even as sparks flew. Mira grinned. "No, this is humanity." The battle raged on. The Gorath had numbers, but numbers meant nothing in chaos. The humans had tricks, and tricks meant everything. By the time the Gorath tried to regroup, dozens of their ships were destroyed or damaged. The Dauntless, though battered nearly to breaking, still flew strong. On the flagship, Varen's chest burned with shame. He had ordered the full fleet against one ship, and still they could not win. He stared at the human vessel, smoke trailing from its hull, engines screaming, but spirit unbroken. "This is no stupid ship," Varen whispered. "This is a weapon of fear." For the first time, he truly respected his enemy. At last, Mira gave the final order. "Break through." The Dauntless fired its railguns one last time, blasting a hole through the Gorath line. Then, with engines roaring, it charged straight out of the battle. The Gorath tried to follow, but their formation was shattered, their ships too slow. The humans escaped. Silence filled the bridge of the Dauntless. The crew was exhausted, bruised, and bloodied. But when they looked at each other, they smiled. "We did it," Ramos whispered. Mira nodded, her voice calm but proud. "We showed them. Humanity will not run. Humanity will not bow. Even the stupidest ship can win if it has the right crew." The crew cheered weakly but with joy. They had survived the impossible. Far across the stars, the legend spread further. Traders told the tale of the human warship that charged into an entire fleet and came out alive. Some laughed at the madness. Others whispered in fear. And in the halls of the Gorath Council, silence reigned. Their fleet had failed. Their order was broken. The humans had turned chaos into a weapon, and now the galaxy was watching. The Dauntless floated in silence across the empty void. Its hull was scarred, its armor blackened, its engines groaning with every push. Fires had been put out, but smoke still curled through some of the vents. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly, patching leaks, rewiring broken panels, and sealing ruptures with whatever scrap they could find. And yet, despite the exhaustion, there was pride in their eyes. They had faced the largest fleet the Gorath had ever sent, and they had survived. Captain Mira Havel stood in the command room, staring at the flickering star map. The Gorath fleet had retreated, limping back to their nearest stronghold. They had not chased the Dauntless. They had not dared. Behind her, Ramos leaned against the railing, his arm in a sling. "We just fought half their navy and lived. I don't think they'll underestimate us again." Patel, covered in grease, laughed. "Underestimate? They'll probably start having nightmares about us." The crew chuckled, but Mira's face remained serious. "This is not the end," she said softly. "This is only the beginning. We've shown them we can't be crushed. Now they'll try to outthink us. They'll try to study us, and we must always be one step ahead." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, word of the battle spread. On neutral trading hubs, merchants whispered tales of the human ship that dived into an enemy fleet and tore its way out. On faraway colonies, children played games pretending to be the junk ship that fooled the mighty Gorath. Even among Gorath citizens, doubt grew. They had always believed their empire was unbreakable, their fleets unbeatable, but now one strange human vessel had shaken that belief. The name Dauntless became known everywhere. In the halls of the Gorath Council, silence hung heavy. The elders sat in shadows, their glowing eyes narrowed with shame. Dozens of their ships destroyed, hundreds damaged, all by one stupid enemy warship. Finally, the oldest counselor spoke. "This is not a war of strength," she said. "This is a war of ideas. We fight with order. They fight with chaos. And chaos is spreading. Some counselors demanded more fleets, more weapons, more discipline, but others hesitated. The cost of facing the humans was growing too high, and at the center of it all, Commander Varen stood silently, remembering every moment of the battle. Varen had once believed the humans were weak. Now he knew better. He remembered the way the Dauntless charged, the way its crew fought with fire in their eyes, the way they turned scrap into weapons. That ship had humiliated him, but also taught him something. "They are not fools," he muttered to himself. "They are survivors. They make the impossible possible. That is why they are dangerous." Back on the Dauntless, the crew gathered in the mess hall for the first time since the battle. Food was scarce and the rations tasted like dust, but laughter filled the room. "Do you remember when we dropped that burning engine core?" Patel said between bites. "They thought we were dead." Their whole squadron cheered, and then boom! We blew them apart from behind. The crew burst into laughter, replaying their favorite moments. "Or the time one of the drones ran out of power," Ramos added. "And we threw it at them anyway." The stories spread, each more exaggerated than the last. They laughed not because the danger was small, but because they had faced it together and survived. Captain Mira entered quietly. The crew fell silent, waiting for her to speak. She smiled faintly and raised her cup. To the Dauntless. To the ship they said was too stupid to win. The hall erupted in cheers. Days passed. Repairs continued. The Dauntless limped toward a hidden human outpost, carrying its wounded but unbroken crew. As they traveled, Mira spent long hours recording battle logs, sending messages to other human ships, and warning them of the Gorath threat. But in her heart she knew something else had changed. Humanity was no longer seen as a young, untested species. They were now something far greater in the eyes of the galaxy. Unpredictable. At the same time, across alien worlds, debates raged. On one neutral world, a council of traders argued over whether it was safer to ally with the Gorath or with the humans. One merchant slammed his fist on the table. "The Gorath are strong, yes, but strength means nothing if it cannot win against a broken warship. The humans fight with tricks, and tricks can win any war." On another planet, alien scholars studied recordings of the battle. They paused on the moment the Dauntless punched through the fleet. "This is madness," one said. "No," another corrected. "This is genius." Back in human space, the news of the battle reached Earth. Families wept with pride. Governments declared new plans to build more ships, and songs were written about the junk warship that refused to die. For the first time, humanity stood tall on the galactic stage. Not because of the strongest warship, not because of the fastest, but because of the one everyone had mocked. As weeks turned into months, the Dauntless was repaired again and again, but it never lost its scars. Its mismatched armor, its patched engines, and its ugly shape became symbols of resilience. When other human captains saw it, they saluted not just the ship, but what it represented, the refusal to surrender. The crew, too, became legends. Ramos, the brave gunner who never missed. Patel, the engineer who turned trash into weapons. And above all, Captain Mira Havel, the leader who dared to charge into a fleet and come out alive. One night, as the ship drifted in quiet space, Mira stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before her, cold and endless. She thought of the future. The Gorath were not finished. They would come again, with new strategies, new traps. Humanity was still outnumbered, still outgunned, but she also thought of her crew, of their courage, of their laughter, even in the face of death. She thought of how one stupid warship had shaken an empire, and she smiled. "Let them come," she whispered. "We'll always be ready." Far away, in secret corners of the galaxy, whispers spread. They say the humans ride a ship made of scrap. They say it charges fleets alone. They say it cannot be killed. And so the legend grew. The Gorath feared it. The traders admired it. Other species wondered if they should follow it. It became more than a warship. It became a symbol. Commander Veyran, sitting in silence on his flagship, received reports of the growing legend. His officers begged him for new plans to crush the humans, but Veyran only shook his head. "You cannot crush a legend," he said quietly. "You can only fear it." Back on Earth, children played with models of the Dauntless, pretending to outsmart fleets of aliens. Songs were sung about the day one broken ship taught the galaxy to respect humanity. And deep in space, the real Dauntless continued its mission. It was not the strongest. It was not the prettiest. But it was the most feared, because it had shown the galaxy a truth they could no longer ignore. Humanity would fight with whatever they had. They would fight with chaos. They would fight with courage. And they would never stop. Captain Mira Havel stood once more on her bridge, surrounded by her loyal crew. The ship hummed with life, patched but ready. "Set course," she said calmly. "There are more battles ahead." The crew nodded, their eyes shining with pride. The Dauntless turned slowly toward the stars, engines burning bright, and in that moment, it was no longer just a ship, it was a legend born from scraps, carried by courage, and feared across the galaxy. The stupidest warship they had ever seen, and the one they would never forget.